There's a version of you that exists only in other people's minds. A version that says yes when you want to say no. A version that smiles through discomfort, apologizes for things that aren't your fault, and feels guilty for taking up space. If that sounds familiar, you might be a people pleaser. And chances are, the roots of this behavior go deeper than you think. They go all the way back to your childhood, back to the people who raised you, back to your parents. Most people pleasers don't realize they're people pleasers. They think they're just being kind, considerate, helpful. But there's a difference between genuine kindness and the exhausting performance of constant agreeability. One comes from a place of choice. The other comes from a place of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of not being enough. And that fear, it was planted early, very early. So let's talk about how that happens. Let's talk about the hidden contract you signed as a child without even knowing it. And let's talk about why breaking free from it might be the most important thing you ever do. When you were a kid, you didn't have the luxury of independence. You relied on your parents for everything. Food, shelter, safety, love. Your survival depended on keeping them happy. And somewhere along the way, you learned a lesson that would shape the rest of your life. You learned that your value wasn't inherent. It was conditional. It had to be earned. And the way you earned it was by being good, by being quiet, by not causing problems, by reading the room and adjusting yourself to fit whatever was needed in that moment. That's where it started. That's where the people pleaser was born. Let's be clear about what conditional love looks like. It's not always loud or obvious. It doesn't always come with harsh words or punishment. Sometimes it's subtle. It's the parent who only praises you when you bring home straight A's. It's the parent who lights up when you're helpful, but goes cold when you express a need. It's the parent who says they love you, but somehow makes you feel like that love could disappear if you step out of line. Conditional love teaches you that who you are isn't enough. You have to be what they need you to be. You have to perform. You have to please. And if you don't, the warmth disappears. The approval vanishes. And you're left feeling like you did something wrong just by being yourself. This creates a transactional relationship with love. You start to believe that affection is something you earn, not something you deserve. You start to see yourself as a product that needs to be polished and presented in just the right way. And here's the dangerous part. You get really good at it. You become an expert at reading people. You learn to notice the tiniest shift in someone's tone, the smallest change in their expression. You become a detective of emotion, always scanning for clues about what someone else needs so you can provide it before they even ask. It's not a skill you chose to develop. It's a survival mechanism, and it's exhausting. Think about the child who tiptoes around a parent's bad mood, the child who learns to gauge whether it's safe to ask for something based on how their parents' day went, the child who becomes responsible for managing emotions that aren't theirs to manage. That child grows up believing that other people's feelings are more important than their own. They grow up thinking that their job in life is to keep everyone else comfortable, even if it means sacrificing their own comfort in the process. That's not love. That's a job, and it's a job you never applied for. Now let's talk about conflict. For most people, conflict is uncomfortable, but manageable. It's a normal part of human relationships. But for the child of parents who couldn't handle conflict, it becomes something much more dangerous. It becomes catastrophe. If your parents fought loudly and unpredictably, you learned that conflict equals chaos. If your parents avoided conflict entirely and let resentment simmer under the surface, you learned that conflict equals silent punishment. Either way, you learned the same lesson. Conflict is bad. Conflict is unsafe. And the best way to protect yourself is to prevent conflict from happening in the first place. So you became a peacemaker. You learned to smooth things over before they escalated. You learned to apologize even when you didn't do anything wrong. You learned to agree even when you disagreed. You learned to swallow your own feelings so that no one else had to deal with discomfort. And over time, this became your default mode. You stopped even considering whether conflict might sometimes be necessary, whether standing up for yourself might sometimes be worth the temporary discomfort. You just avoided it altogether. Because deep down, conflict still feels like it could destroy everything, like it could cost you the love and acceptance you've worked so hard to earn. Here's where it gets even more complicated. Some children don't just learn to avoid conflict, they learn to manage their parents' emotions entirely. This is called parentification. It's when a child is forced into the role of emotional caretaker for their own parent. Maybe your parent was anxious and you learned to be the calm one. Maybe your parent was sad and you learned to be the entertainer who cheered them up. Maybe your parent was angry and you learned to be the buffer who absorbed their frustration so no one else had to. Whatever the dynamic, the message was the same. Your parents' emotional well-being was your responsibility. And if they were unhappy, it meant you failed. This creates a deeply ingrained belief that other people's happiness is directly tied to your own safety. If the people around you are happy, you're safe. If they're unhappy, something bad is about to happen. And the only way to prevent that bad thing is to fix their unhappiness as quickly as possible. So you become hypervigilant. You're always watching, always analyzing, always trying to predict what someone needs before they even know they need it. It's like living with an alarm system that never turns off. And the cost of that constant vigilance is steep. The cost is your sense of self. When you spend your whole life adjusting to other people's needs, you lose touch with your own. You stop knowing what you actually want because you've trained yourself to only notice what other people want. You stop knowing what you actually feel because you've trained yourself to prioritize what other people feel. You stop knowing who you actually are because you've spent so long being whoever you need to be in any given moment. And the worst part is you might not even realize it's happening because people-pleasing doesn't feel like self-betrayal when you're in the middle of it. It feels like being a good person. It feels like being kind. It feels like doing the right thing. But here's the truth. Saying yes when you mean no isn't kindness. It's self-abandonment. Apologizing when you didn't do anything wrong isn't humility. It's self-erasure. And constantly putting other people's needs above your own isn't generosity. It's a survival strategy you learned when you were too young to know any better. And it's time to start questioning it. Let's talk about what happens in your head when you're stuck in this pattern. The mental noise is relentless. After every interaction, you replay it. You analyze every word you said, every reaction you got. You search for evidence that you might have upset someone. You search for clues that someone might be mad at you. And if you find even the tiniest hint of disapproval, you spiral. You convince yourself that you've ruined everything, that you've damaged the relationship beyond repair, that you need to fix it immediately. So you send the apology text. You over-explain. You try to smooth things over even when there's nothing to smooth over. And the cycle continues. This constant rumination isn't just unpleasant. It's a prison. You can't relax because you're always monitoring. You can't be present because you're always analyzing. You can't enjoy your relationships because you're always worried about losing them. And the irony is, that all this effort to keep people close often pushes them away, because people can sense when you're not being genuine. They can sense when you're performing instead of connecting, and they can sense when you're more interested in managing their perception of you than in actually being yourself. People pleasing also creates an illusion of control. When you were a child, you had very little control over your environment, but you learned that if you could just be good enough, helpful enough, pleasing enough, you could influence how your parents treated you. You could make yourself safer. You could earn love. And that gave you a sense of power in a powerless situation. The problem is, you brought that strategy into adulthood. You still believe that if you can just please everyone, you can control the outcome. You can prevent rejection. You can guarantee acceptance. You can make yourself safe. But you can't. You can't control how other people feel about you, no matter how hard you try. You can't prevent someone from leaving by being perfect. You can't earn unconditional love through conditional behavior. And the more you try, the more you lose yourself in the process. You end up giving away so much of yourself that there's nothing left for you. You end up so focused on being what other people need that you forget you're allowed to have needs too. You end up so afraid of losing people that you lose yourself instead. And that's the real tragedy of people pleasing. The very thing you're trying to protect ends up being the thing you sacrifice. So where does that leave you? If you've recognized yourself in this pattern, you might be feeling a mix of emotions right now. Maybe relief that someone finally put words to what you've been experiencing. Maybe sadness about the years you've spent putting yourself last. Maybe anger at the people who taught you to be this way. Maybe fear about what it would mean to change. All of those feelings are valid. And all of those feelings are part of the process of waking up to this pattern and deciding to do something different. But here's what you need to understand. The map to recovery isn't found in changing others. It's found in changing the blueprint of yourself that was drawn long ago. It's found in recognizing that the rules you learned as a child don't have to govern your adult life. It's found in realizing that you're no longer dependent on your parents for survival. You're no longer a child who needs to earn love through good behavior. You're an adult who gets to decide what kind of relationships you want and what you're willing to tolerate. And that shift in perspective changes everything. The pain of people pleasing reaches its peak when you finally realize how much of yourself you've betrayed. When you look back and see all the times you said yes when you meant no. All the times you apologized for existing. All the times you made yourself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. All the times you swallowed your truth to keep the peace. That's the climax of this internal conflict. The moment when you can no longer ignore the cost of this pattern. The moment when you realize that the person you've been protecting everyone else from is yourself, your real self, your authentic self, the self that has needs and boundaries and opinions and feelings that matter. And here's the deepest wound of all. People pleasing is incredibly lonely. You can be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone because no one really knows you. They know the version of you that you've carefully constructed for their benefit. They know the yes person, the agreeable person, the easy person, but they don't know the real you because you've been hiding that person for so long that even you don't know who they are anymore. And that isolation is suffocating. It's the feeling of being a stranger in your own life, of going through the motions of connection without ever actually connecting, of being seen without ever actually being known. This is the breaking point. This is where the pain becomes impossible to ignore. And this is where the real work begins. Because healing from people pleasing isn't about becoming selfish or unkind. It's not about swinging to the opposite extreme and only caring about yourself. It's It's about finding a middle ground that you've never experienced before. It's about learning that you can be kind and have boundaries, that you can care about others and care about yourself, that you can be a good person without sacrificing who you are in the process. And that starts with one fundamental shift, the shift from external validation to internal validation. For your entire life, you've been looking outside yourself for approval. You've been checking other people's faces for signs that you're doing okay. You've been measuring your worth by how other people respond to you. But that's an endless game you can never win, because external validation is unstable. It changes based on other people's moods, their biases, their own unhealed wounds. You could be the kindest, most helpful, most pleasing person in the world, and someone will still find fault with you. Someone will still reject you. Someone will still be unhappy. And if your sense of worth depends on their approval, you'll always be at their mercy. The shift to internal validation means learning to check in with yourself instead of checking in with everyone else. It means asking yourself what you actually want instead of asking yourself what other people want from you. It means noticing your own feelings instead of only noticing other people's feelings. It means trusting your own judgment instead of constantly seeking reassurance. And it means accepting that you won't always get it right, that you'll make mistakes, that you'll disappoint people sometimes. And that's okay, because being imperfect and authentic is better than being perfect and fake. This brings us to the first key insight. You need to learn to feel again, not just the safe feelings like happiness and gratitude, but the uncomfortable ones like guilt and anxiety and disappointment. People pleasers spend so much energy trying to avoid uncomfortable feelings that they become numb. They become disconnected from their own emotional experience. And the way back to yourself requires reconnecting with that experience. It requires allowing yourself to feel guilty when you say no, allowing yourself to feel anxious when someone is upset with you, allowing yourself to feel disappointed when a relationship doesn't work out. Not because these feelings are fun, but because they're information. They're part of being human. And you can't make authentic choices if you're not willing to feel the full range of human emotion. This is what it means to let thought serve feeling instead of the other way around. For so long, your thoughts have been in the driver's seat. Your mind has been running constant calculations about how to keep everyone happy. But feelings aren't problems to be solved. They're experiences to be felt. And when you allow yourself to actually feel them without immediately trying to fix them or make them go away, something shifts. You realize you can survive discomfort. You realize you can tolerate someone being upset with you. You realize you can sit with guilt without needing to apologize your way out of it. And that realization is freedom. The second key insight is about boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. They're not about keeping people out or being mean or selfish. They're maps of your true self. They're the lines that define where you end and someone else begins. And learning to set boundaries is one of the most loving things you can do. Not just for yourself, but for the people around you. Because when you have clear boundaries, people know where they stand with you. They know what's okay and what's not okay. They know the real you instead of the performing you. And that creates the possibility for genuine connection. Saying no is not mean. It's honest. It's you respecting your own limits and trusting that the relationship can handle that honesty. And if it can't, then it wasn't a relationship built on mutual respect in the first place. It was a relationship built on you abandoning yourself for someone else's comfort. And that's not sustainable. That's not real. That's not what you deserve. You deserve relationships where you can show up as yourself, where you can have needs, where you can say no without the relationship falling apart, where you can be imperfect and still be loved. But here's what most people don't tell you about boundaries. They're uncomfortable at first, really uncomfortable. Because when you start saying no after a lifetime of saying yes, people notice. And they don't always like it. They might push back. They might accuse you of changing. They might try to make you feel guilty. And that's when you'll be most tempted to go back to your old patterns. That's when you'll want to apologize and take it all back and return to being the easy person you used to be. But that discomfort is part of the process. It's not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're doing something different. And different is threatening to people who benefited from the old version of you. This is where the third key insight comes in: unconditional self-acceptance. This is the core resolution. This is the thing that changes everything. For your whole life, you've been operating under the belief that your worth is conditional, that you have to earn your place, that you have to prove your value, that you're only as good as your last act of service. But that's a lie. Your worth isn't something you earn. It's something you have simply by existing. You don't have to be useful to be valuable. You don't have to be perfect to be lovable. You don't have to make everyone happy to deserve happiness yourself. You are enough exactly as you are, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Unconditional self-acceptance means extending to yourself the same grace you've been extending to everyone else your entire life. It means treating yourself with the same kindness you show to others. It means forgiving yourself for the times you fell short instead of beating yourself up. It means recognizing that you're a human being with limitations, and that's not something to apologize for. It's just reality. And when you truly accept yourself unconditionally, something miraculous happens. You stop needing everyone else's approval because you already have your own. And that makes you free in a way you've never been free before. Here's what I want you to understand. You're not broken. You're not damaged beyond repair. You learned a set of behaviors that made sense in the environment you grew up in. Those behaviors helped you survive. They protected you when you were vulnerable. But you're not in that environment anymore. You're not that vulnerable child anymore. You're an adult with agency and choice, and the power to create different patterns. And unlearning people-pleasing isn't about rejecting who you've been. It's about integrating all the parts of yourself that you've been hiding. It's about bringing your authentic self out of the shadows and into the light. The journey from hidden self to authentic self isn't easy. It requires courage. It requires patience. It requires a willingness to feel uncomfortable. It requires letting go of relationships that can't hold the real you. It requires grieving the version of yourself you thought you had to be. But on the other side of that journey is a life that feels like yours. A life where you're not constantly performing. A life where you can relax. A life where you can connect genuinely. A life where you can finally stop working so hard to be loved and just be yourself. And that is worth every uncomfortable moment along the way. You might be wondering what this looks like in practice. It looks like pausing before you automatically say yes. It looks like asking yourself what you actually want before you ask what someone else wants. It looks like setting a boundary even though your hands are shaking. It looks like saying no without explaining yourself into oblivion. It looks like letting someone be disappointed without trying to fix their disappointment. It looks like choosing yourself even when it feels selfish. It looks like trusting that the right people will respect you more for your honesty than they ever respected you for your compliance. It looks like building a life that honors who you are instead of who you think you should be. And here's what I know to be true. The people who truly love you don't need you to be a people pleaser. They want to know the real you. They want you to have boundaries. They want you to be honest. They want you to take care of yourself. And the people who only like you when you're saying yes to everything, those aren't your people. Those are people who are using you. And letting them go makes room for the relationships that will actually fill you up instead of draining you dry. So if you've recognized yourself in this video, I want you to know something. Your parents might have made you a people pleaser, but you get to decide whether you stay one. You get to decide whether you continue living by rules that were written for a child who no longer exists. You get to decide whether you're willing to do the hard work of becoming who you actually are instead of who you were trained to be. And I want you to know that it's possible. It's possible to break free from this pattern. It's possible to build a life where you're not constantly exhausting yourself for everyone else's comfort. It's possible to have relationships where you're seen and known and loved for who you actually are. It's possible to need less, see more clearly, and finally come home to yourself. The transformation from people pleaser to authentic person isn't about becoming perfect at boundaries or never caring what anyone thinks. It's about slowly, gradually, courageously reclaiming the parts of yourself you've been giving away. It's about learning that you can be kind without being a doormat, that you can care about others without abandoning yourself, that you can be loved for who you are instead of what you do. And that journey starts right now with one simple question. What do I actually want? Not what do I think I should want? Not what would make everyone else happy, but what do I actually want? Start there. Start with that question and see where it leads you. If this video resonated with you, do me a favor. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling me what part hit home for you. And subscribe to this channel because we're going to keep having these conversations. We're going to keep exploring the hidden patterns that shape our lives. And we're going to keep doing the work of becoming who we're meant to be. Thanks for being here. And remember, you're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to have needs. You're allowed to be yourself. I'll see you in the next one.